Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit in June 2021 on, I believe it's the sixth session on ASVS user stories with Mario Platt. And, I highly recommend you guys to check the previous one. Mario's just going to do a quick intro, but I think this is is one of those super important topics that it's a little bit ahead of its time, but, in my view, it tries to address a fundamental problem, which is how do you actually codify the ASVS guidance items, right? Because it's all nice and good to list them as a massive shopping list, right? The challenge is to actually how to capture it. So Mario, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so if you want to kind of see from the start, we have about a 20 to 30 minute introduction to stories overall in the initial videos of this series. We'll be sure to link it down below. So today we are really only going to cover at a very high level what are the reasons behind the project, just a 5-minute introduction, and then we're going to go straight into continue the work where we left it last time. Um, so without just to situate where we are with regards to, okay, no, sorry, yeah, here it is. Right, this is not the paper on resilience that you're looking for. Um, right. So, as most of you will probably know, there's a lot of different domains to SVS. We started working already on lots of them as part of the this project, Security Stories. So the ones that are in green are the ones that we've started. The ones in black are the ones where more work is still needed. But the reason why we created this project was that I think there are two sides of the collaboration required to do this security thing effectively. That on one hand, we've got the OSPSVS standard that is a brilliant standard. However, focused or the format it has is very good to support directly compliance processes because it's based on a kind of a checklist that people can go through. And on the other hand, you also have OWASP cheat sheets and OWASP ASVS testing guide that already have a lot of code and ways that we can verify the requirements of ASVS. What I don't think is currently covered in the OWASP projects themselves is something that links this through an agile delivery process. So this is what this project is trying to achieve, is really creating that middle layer where we can reference on one hand to the compliance to the ASVS checklist, and on the other hand also connect back to guidance, code snippets, etc., so that engineers can actually look at ways to mitigate some of the threats that ASVS helps us mitigate. So it's really, and this is the last part we're going to go through. The main thing is really, I think there's something here for the engineering teams because it provides kind of a catalog that you can consume off the shelf, contextualize your acceptance criteria once you start using these user stories. And it gives you all of these things that you can kind of take off the shelf. And on the other hand, for risk and compliance teams, it helps extend the scope of old school, let's say, risk and compliance teams that may not frame their requirements or codify their requirements as code, and help bring them onto the journey of thinking from a BDD perspective, writing Gherkin syntax that can eventually help them move into actually codifying the requirements in compliance as code DSLs like Chef Inspect or Open Policy Agent, or even learn JavaScript and use Test Cafe or Cypress if that's what your internal teams are using. Right. So the idea is really to bring all of these parties together and have shared artifacts that people can collaborate better over them. So that's basically what we're trying to do here. The example of going through writing the Gherkin syntax for security headers, and then what a test using Chef Inspect DSL could actually look like, right? And the key part that I'd like to make sure it's consistent in this project is really this tags part. Right? That one thing is us testing for good engineering practice, right? And that maybe putting your cookies to the right level of security that they should have. The other thing is making this directly consumable by the compliance process. And by leveraging metadata and adding these tags, we make it easier for the compliance team to understand what it means to them in their context, the compliance and the risk context. So here we use examples for ASVS or ISO. We could do tags for instance, tagging particular risks in your risk register. You can use tags, whatever your compliance or risk teams feel is useful for them to connect the dots. Right. I think that was a good intro. Anything else anyone else would like to add at this point before we go into looking at the...
What languages have you implemented this from a testing point of view?
So we are, let me show you the VS Code. So at the moment, it's not across all of them. We have some tests where we have chef in spec, and there's only one or two with OPA, Open Policy Agent. Now, where it's still to kind of understand, yeah. So these are examples with chef in spec, for instance, to look at content. Yeah. So there's a few, the ones we have, which aren't many, about 20%, maybe a bit less, have chef in spec. There's only kind of one or two examples from Open Policy Agent, and the rest of it. So we still need to do. So from my point of view, I think I'm more interested in first finishing the list with the user stories, because I think the chef in spec and the OPA parts, there are more and more kind of templates being shared outside. And so once we finish the stories, whatever we can just point to a source that is maintained by anyone else, I'm happy to do so instead of having it here.
And that gherkin that you have there, which is brilliant, right? Have you done any work actually codifying the things behind it?
You mean like this?
Well, so do you have a runner for that? If you go up, right, that text that you have there, right? So if you go up a little bit, that gherkin thing that you have there, given HTTP response, HTTP security header, when I define use case, etc. I do, a lot of those are going to be, fundamentally building blocks, right? Do you have that on any language already?
No, so the few things we have, it's here on this DSL, right? So it's verifying whatever use case, then you decide that is the case. So with this project, the way I envision it initially, at least, was really more to serve as the glue, right? So the main focus is the user stories part of it, and then seeing what we can either build ourselves if it doesn't exist, or reference from other materials if it's already out there.
Yeah, but you know that on Gherkin, right? Like that behind the scenes, you actually have that converted to code, right? Given HTTP response is something that, an HTTP security header, like in fact, it's probably a couple of things missing there because you need to make it so where to go and get it, right? But that, then you add a header and constraints, yeah. So
that logic is here, right? So we're using the HTTP model, then I check the headers, I added the content disposition, and I make sure that the use case that I've defined is the one that I expect.
But shouldn't that code also be executable, like this code here?
Should it?
Well, yeah, because, with Gherkin, right, you can actually write the control. In fact, what will be interesting to see is I can write something like that, and then behind the scenes we are mapping the tags and the ASVS, right, and the things that happens behind the scenes. But from a dev point of view, being able to write it like that will make a massive difference.
Yeah. So for instance, in Cypress, you typically have your Gherkin syntax written in the something files, can't remember the name, but you still tie that back to actual JavaScript code, right? So it's not the Gherkin itself that is
exactly. It could be Java, could be Python, could be Ruby, could be all sorts of things, right? There's lots of Gherkin interpreters, right?
Yep.
That's what. Yeah. Okay. But you haven't done that bit, right?
No. That's not yet done.
Okay.
But it's an interesting idea. So what I wanted to try and avoid is thinking along the lines of trying to come up with a specific type of DSL or whatever just for this, right? I don't think that would make sense. Also, bear in mind that these are all snippets, so in and by themselves they don't do much. So then to use this, you need to create your own control files and then run them. But that is kind of considered separate. So here we're just saying this is the thing, and this is how a way that you can validate what your settings are.
Cool.
Cool. Any other comments or questions? No. So let's okay. Let's see where we start. Do you, John? Do you remember where we left it at the last time?
No. Let me.
Right, I'm opening ASVS in another screen here just to make it easy to reference. Yeah. So I'm opening 4.0.2, which is the latest one on the repo, OWASP ASVS one. So let me just change this different screens. Yep, and here we go. So we left it with all of these. Is there any particular area where people are more interested in going through that today? Anything that is particularly relevant to something you're working on right now?
Can you show me the list?
Yeah, so we've done API and web service. We've done from 13.1.1 to 13.3.1.
Okay.
So there's still a lot inside that. We've done a lot of the password ones, but there's loads of stuff on the password aspect of it. So we could, there was something that we worked on last time. Yeah, configuration is, I think almost all of them are done, if I recall off the top of my head, but we can verify over here. Let's see, config. Yeah, so we have up to 14.5. Yeah, we've got from 14. So 14.1 isn't there because it 14.1 is what? Oh, so it's build. So that's why maybe we didn't go for that. So 4.1 isn't, 14.1 isn't there. That's one missing from config verification. Files. So this is in a different format that Louis submitted. So we need to kind of fix that later. But we have until 12.6. Not all of them, but it also goes up to 12. Yeah, actually it has 12.6, 12.5.3, 12.5.2. Yeah, I think it has everything. This one, yeah, it just needs to be broken down. So on files, we're done. And then we've got logging. There's still a lot to do, and also session management. There's a lot to do, and encoding. No, encoding is done. Encoding is completely done. Session management, config verification or authentication, and API are the ones that we started, but we haven't finished.
So, well, my vote will be for the APIs, but
yep. John, does that sound okay?
Yeah, I'm happy to trail along and support where I can.
Let's do that. So API, let's see, we did. So I can't share both documents, but I'm going to the section 13 on the ASVS standard.
Yeah, me too.
Continue to scroll. Okay, so we have 13.1, which is encodings, 13.1.1, encodings in parsers, 1.2, 1.3. So there are two missing. Oh, okay, I understand why we did that. So at the moment, we only have covered the L1 requirements. So that's why we don't have the rest of 13.1, for instance. and I think that's the state of all of them. Let me
Yeah, because
just check.
0.4 and 0.5 are level 2 and above.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so that's it. So at the moment we've got level 1 covered. Let's do level 2 and level 3 and then. Okay, so let's start with
13.14.
sorry?
Sorry, go ahead. It's 13.14, I presume. Do you?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna create a new file. .13.1.4. Yeah, this naming convention probably needs some work at some point, but that's not the priority right now. So in 13.1.4, it's about authorization decisions.
Yep.
Decisions URI.md. So I'm just going to copy the structure of one of them.
So I'm looking at the CWE. It's 13.1.4.
Yes, there's decisions made at both URI and resource level. My mouse started playing games on me today, so this is being very difficult to click through stuff. Okay, so this is what the standard actually says. Verified authorization decisions are made by both the URI, enforced by programmatic or declarative, security, the controller root, and the resource level enforced by model-based permissions.
So 2 lines up, it should say 13.1.4.
Oh, yep.
And then above that, it says 13.14, and it should have a dot in it.
Thank you. So here we have, like we did with some of the other ones, it would maybe make sense to break them down because these are actually two things, right? Authorization decisions made at URI and the other one at the resource level. So we can probably create feature names for both. Yep.
So how do you capture in here the fact that you need to have that data, right? You need to have a list of authorization decisions made by the machine, by the application, right? And then the fact that you need to understand where they made in the URL or URI, right?
Yep. So that's exactly the reason why I suggested that we shouldn't include acceptance criteria, right? Because that will always be very contextual. It will depend on the application. It will depend on your authorization model.
Yeah, but ultimately you need to capture that, right?
That needs to be considered on your acceptance criteria, right? It doesn't change the requirement to make the auth decision at the URI, for instance. It just changes what that means in your own context.
Yeah. Okay.
Or for the application that you're looking at. So it's decisions made at So as a security engineer, I want to verify authorization decisions. And then it's on the given this is you're right at both. So this is just the main user story are made at resource level so that I So what are we trying to get to with this specific one?
I mean, the one-line description of CWE 285, which is the referenced weakness, is the software does not perform or incorrectly performs an authorization check when an actor attempts to access a resource or perform an action. And scrolling down, it's got a couple of examples. One is a SQL query on a database and involves injection. And the other example is, I think it's to do with getting access to admin.
So this is not really about reducing
The concept's quite simple. It's just making it concrete. It's a bit difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the question?
Yeah.
So in terms of the what we're trying to achieve with this particular one, with this particular feature, so it's forced by programmatic or declarative security at the controller or out and at the resource level, enforced by model-based permissions. So we're trying to first.
Show me another one just that you've done, so to get an idea. So unauthorized. Okay. Cool. Show me another one.
Yep.
Unauthorized. Okay. So now go back to the one we edited. Well, so then there has to be something, users don't access, there's no unauthorized access, right?
Yeah, to prevent opportunities for unauthorized access. I think we can probably, that work.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's in a specific case, isn't it? It's authorized for that resource, not just somebody who's authorized to use the API, but perhaps isn't authorized for that particular resource.
Unauthorized access to a given resource. Yep. Okay, so on the scenarios, we would have two of them, right? We take this out. So one for the URI and another one for the resource level. So, given. So this is always in the context of given the need to access a particular resource, right? That's where the authorization comes in.
Say a protected resource? Or privileged resource? Yeah, right. Given the need, right?
Requiring protection. When I
call the service or call the resource, right? Or invoke a method or something like that, right?
Yeah. When I access resource, then I by the access, the authorization. And notify the user of successful access attempt. Yep.
So how do you
The
understand
user, no, this is on API, and then notify the service. Sorry?
Is the distinction that's being made that you have, say, a REST endpoint, and it's about not being able to make a call to the specific resource that's that REST path, for instance, and then secondly, there's another layer where the resource itself checks as well that the authorization is there. Is that what we're saying? That there's basically two authorization checks, one for the actual API and one for the implementation of that resource underneath.
Yeah. So the way I read it is one part is what you're saying. So when an API endpoint is being accessed, making sure that whatever is accessing is authorized to do so, and on the other hand is also the lower level of the component itself having the model-based permissions, right? So something more like RBAC.
So it's kind of like access to the path that's the REST path, and then secondly, whether is it just like checking whether it's a get, put, post kind of operation, or is it the type of operation that's being done upon the resource? I'm thinking, I realize this might not be for actual REST APIs, because not every API which has a URI has to be a REST interface, does it?
Yeah, correct.
This
so
is one of those.
Sorry, I'm pushing out a bit here. I'm not trying to.
Yeah, well, I think this is sometimes one of those where, I think security, we actually sometimes are a bit prescriptive in how we do these things, because it's almost like this almost tries to prevent the big mistake, which is when people do decisions at URI level, they sometimes don't tend to do on the actual controller or router level, or at resource level. And then what it means you can have all sorts of blind spots, because you might, it might have, you might not be able to protect everything from a URI. But the interesting, I guess, and my way of viewing this, right? I would actually argue that, you almost want to do the protection if you do the protection at the controller or router or resource level, you almost don't need to do it at URI level.
But is the point that here we're only talking about level 2 and level 3 ASVS rather than level 1? So we're actually mandating that that gating is happening at two separate places.
Yeah.
To provide the.
Yeah. Is that defense in depth, right? So
defense in depth, exactly. Yeah.
You want to make sure that all your URLs are protected, and not just that, but also you got control around and resource level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And because they are sometimes different, right?
Yeah.
Just because you've got an API, for instance, you may have an API token that allows you to log in to access a number of endpoints, but that doesn't mean there isn't another access model that then allows you more granular permissions on a particular service within that.
Well, the other one that I think this also tries to protect is sort of horizontal escalation. So, I've seen a lot of cases where, if, for example, a user cannot open an admin page, right? So you protect at URL level, but a user A can access data from user B, right?
Yep.
Because the URL is the same. So you all have access to so every user needs to have access to that URL, right?
Yep.
but user A should not have access to user B data.
Yep. So actually, that's a very good probably distinction to make here. So, for instance, an API token allows me to make sure that only people with the right token can access the API itself. But then, on a per client basis, I may have different things that would be more at the resource level on what they can do or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, determined by the
Yep.
the authorization. Yes.
Okay.
And actually, so how do you map this thing here, right? So if you look at like on your scenarios, can you have multiple scenarios or multiple
Yep.
stories?
So on this one, we would have at least two that we've done for other ones. So one to cover the URI part and the other one to cover the resource level.
How do you distinguish that between the levels? Because at the moment, because I'm also thinking in terms of parsing this, right? So is your user story the same level as your scenario, the same level of like when you add another story, are you going to go another level down, like story 1, story 2, story 3?
Yep. Because the idea being that for instance, this type of thing particularly would be useful for instance for the QA engineers, right? So it's not just about verifying the authorization, but making sure did we notify people, right? Or did we give them an error message when they didn't? So it's all those things that you can then create the validation through the different screens.
You see, but I know I get why you don't want it to be very specific. But for example, in my case, I would want to be very specific, right? I would actually.
The implementation has to be right.
Has to be very specific, right? So it has to link to this, right? So it's almost like we need a way then to link this. Are you adding metadata to the top? Sorry, just on a thing. You know that document. Go to the top. Okay, can I make a recommendation?
Sure.
Have you seen how Hugo does metadata? The Hugo site.
Probably not.
So, in fact, go to, can you open the Summit site on the browser? Just go to a browser. So I think this will actually help a lot, right? In terms of automatic parsing. In fact, there's even like, there's good YAML. In fact, you can go, no, just go to the website and then you can go, you can very quickly find the page. So my thinking here is, or you can go from there if you want to click on Open Security Summit. You can go from the repo if you want. Just go up, not that guy. Go to the Open Security Summit organization, and then I just want to show you the website. So you go that one, OSS 21, and then you go into content, above. There you go, right? And then you can go sessions, and then you're going to find your one like 2021. So let's find this one, right? Mini summits. Right, so if you go June, and then I think you are on DevSecOps, I think, or governance. It might be governance. Pick one of these, right? It doesn't matter. I think it might be on DevSecOps actually. All right. So you see that thing at the top, right? So if you just go edit or raw, so this is basically the file that gets used to build the site. But can you see how we have a whole set of metadata?
Yep.
So this is insanely valuable, right? Because you can see that you got the title, you got the stuff. So this is how we, for example, build a schedule, right? So when we want to assign, so if I want to do this session in July, I just change that June to July, and there's the Hey Summit link, and there's a Zoom link, right? And there's organized, etc., right? So if you have something like this in top of your, what's it called? Each of those ASVS, actually now there's a way to programmatically find those pages.
Yeah. So I had thought about the problem, but I had thought about a different way to address it. Let me show you. So we have access to the to the JSON ASVS in JSON formats and XML. Where is that? Templates, no. XM. So this is XML, this is JSON. So what I thought about kind of what I had in my mind, I hadn't shared, but something I had thought about as well would be potentially to keep this structure, but think about how this information could be an extension to this. so that if you want to
Yeah,
kind of
but if
glue
you
it
look
together.
at that, right, like
Yep.
if you look at that, for example, like that short code is your key,
Yep.
right? And you kind of already have that there on the other side,
Yes.
right? So you could see that V.111,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
got it there. But you need to make these consume, because at the moment you would actually force me to parse this,
Yes.
right? And I would have to parse your XML file, so your markdown file, which wouldn't scale. What you want is to actually so if you add your metadata items as basically the YAML bits right at the top, right? Basically key name value pairs, then it can be cross-referenced with this.
Yep. That was my thinking in potentially using this, thinking in terms of extension to this JSON format that already exists to make it more easier to consume.
Yeah, but where would you put the JSON in your side? So would you add, well, so the other option is to actually put all your content in JSON instead of Markdown.
Yep. There was, yep, that was one of the things that that had crossed my mind, but yeah, those are all.
Yeah, well, I think for that would be cool. But I think for that you need an editor.
Yeah,
that,
probably.
or else
But
you wouldn't be able
so
to.
the main thing I really want to get across is get done first is really cover the whole of the standard, and then I think I do think it would be good to try and make this more easily consumable. Another thing that I thought was potentially using the metadata model of the SKF, the security something framework, knowledge framework, which is an OWASP ASVS project as well, and we reference here in a lot of the checks that we've done. So,
What does that look like?
You've never used it? It's really
So.
cool, really cool. And I think there are some things online. SKF, Security Knowledge Framework. It's actually on the news site now. So I actually have the Docker container. I don't have it open now, but I used to, yeah, when I was going through all of this, I always kept it open. So you can download this as a service and kind of go through that. Just watch the documentation. Yep. So basically, this is what it looks like. And then you go into checklists, knowledge base, etc., and you can go through all of this stuff.
Yeah, so I know that, but you were saying that there's a format that they have.
Yep. Which they also have. Where would I see there? No, not here. No, I don't know. So basically, they have some JSON stuff over here somewhere. Oh, that yeah, that basically connects the requirements with the knowledge base with some of the other things. I don't know where that is now. Maybe on workflows? No. It's just the SEMGRAP stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I need to look for it later. But I think so. From my point of view, I think it's kind of using the time wisely would be to start on getting the whole. Oh, Lewis is joining us. Doing the whole of the standard first, and then thinking about the format itself.
I agree.
But I agree. I'd like to consume this in an easier way.
Because I don't think it's a lot to add to this, but you just start to have that metadata, right? Even something as simple as the status of this. Is it completed? Even if you want to say, I'm going to do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, pass 1, pass 2, pass 3, being able to add little name value pairs to each document will actually allow already a lot of really good visualization and mappings of this.
And that is probably easier than thinking about the full JSON, etc. And we can always create a JSON from that, right?
I think you need a better solution for the JSON straight away, right? Because or else it's going to be really hard to edit. This is actually, I actually almost think that you want to have a way that you can write like this, but you have a standardized way of doing it, so you can almost do that conversion programmatically. You know what I mean? Instead of actually writing natively in JSON, I think he's going to get complex very fast.
Okay, fair enough. Yep. Yeah, let's do a mock of what that could look like and take it from there.
Yep, cool.
That sounds like a good idea. So shall we go? Is Louis with us?
I am here.
Hey, welcome.
I just wanted to add to the conversation right now because I just joined and saw the conversation. So basically the ASVS, I have been working a lot on the ASVS. The ASVS generates JSON from Markdown. So there's a small script that parses JSON from Markdown. So I think the last time I pushed to your repository, Mario, I took basically the JSON output from ASVS, parsed it into Markdown with the added fields for everything. So I basically have, I'm not sure if this is these are the versions that I think V12 might be. Yeah, I think I pushed an older version. So I have been working on that. I have almost finished with all files so far together with a colleague at work. So we're betting a lot on this to enable our developers.
Yep.
And we have generated this file from JSON. Now the way backwards is basically the same thing, right? So once if I can adapt the ASVS Markdown regular expression, whatever thing that they're using to read these files, I can basically generate or slurp all of these and generate JSON out of it.
Yep.
Because it follows a very strict declaration. So I was a bit lazy and I didn't create a single file for every single requirement. I generated one file for chapter 13, one file for chapter 12, etc., etc. So that's how I have been doing that. That allows me to go a little bit faster, seeing every single ASVS requirement and right underneath the Gherkin story for both the feature as I would like to show that and the story given then when or given when then syntax in Gherkin. So yeah, I might need to take any references to my company internals from the files we're working on, but I can donate most of the effort for this OWASP project.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so are there any particular parts that you haven't covered in the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, let me take a look. So basically what is really missing, I just finished the chapter on encryption. I think chapter 12, I might need to merge it. So the thing is, I have some files, but not in the nice format, and I'm reviewing everything. So chapter 13, 12, config. I think chapter 14 could take some love. So chapter 14 could be a good one.
Okay.
Do you have
that
it?
is still
No,
not covered. We have 14 is config verification, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. So where is it? We already have some of that here. Yeah. So we have from
you already have most of it.
Yeah, these were kind of the easier ones. It's mostly kind of HTTP cookies. So this is where I started, even on other stuff that I've done.
I just looked at data protection. There's nothing there. Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. Yeah, we don't even have the heading.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So data is one I don't have anything on. Okay. Communications, chapter 9 is another one.
Yeah, let me write it down.
Malicious code, chapter 10. So 8, 9, 10. It's at least they're sequential. So 8, 9, 10, and I think 11. Yeah, 8, 9, 10, 11. Those I haven't touched.
Okay, cool. Just to get your thoughts on this, because obviously you've been contributing a lot of stuff, and thank you again for all of that. Would you prefer to do, and this question for everyone else as well, do you think it's that we should stick with this type of format that Louis did, or is the additional information on these other ones also helpful?
You
I don't
just
have
show
a problem
both?
in, so I don't have a problem at all in kind of taking this and creating new files and all of that. I just want to, because
Can you quickly just show both versions? Which
Yep.
ones? So
this one here is one of the of those. So it basically goes through each of the kind of the story at the top, right, and then the
Yeah.
different scenarios. What it doesn't have is a kind of a description of the requirement, the user story.
So let me
the
push to
links.
you one of the files that have no, because that one is better. So let me push to you 13, which
Okay.
is empty. I will just copy it from my repository and put it on yours.
Okay.
And make a quick push.
But I would say that one thing I like about the structure you have on the one that's now here is the fact that you have an entry per item, because I feel that if anything, this will grow. If anything, you might even have a folder eventually per item, right? So I quite like that level of granularity.
Yep. And I think as metadata, then it makes it easier to reference as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Because basically, look, I really like I really like to use the file system as a database, right? It works really, really, really well, right? Because it's easy to index, it's easy to parse, it's easy to scale. It's almost like you make each file as atomic as possible, and that gives you a lot of good granularity on it, which is actually really good.
Yep.
So I really like that.
So
And actually, maybe
yeah, you know what? I'll send it by email. I think it's faster than making a whole pull request. Just give me one second. I'm just putting it in an email. I have your email, Mario.
Yeah.
So I'll just send it to you. Give me 1 second. I'm almost done with a copying, and then I'll send it to you by mail. And it's, I think, the fastest way to get it done.
Okay. Can you send to the mplatt@gmail.com? I think you have maybe another one.
I think I have your Cloud Margin account.
That works as well. Yeah. I was just thinking the Privacy Beacon, my company one, I don't have that on this laptop.
Yeah, I mean, whatever works for you. Give me just a second.
Adam, Cloud Margin or personal, Gmail, both work. Yeah, and I think kind of these links really help, and I think that's one of the things that I really want to. I think I'm a bit precious about keeping, because what I really want is these stories not to be dumped on people. Kind of, this is what you need to do, but actually having the links to either cheat sheets or other external links, so that others. So these session management ones don't have much. But these other ones, like synthesization, encoding, they all have loads of links to cheat sheet series, etc., and other blogs that talk about the problems to make it really simple to consume.
Yeah. 13, 12 files as well. So let me send you 2 files.
Yep.
Second. 12 files. Local. Okay, so and add another file. Sorry about that. 12. Okay, there you go. I'll just send it without any comment, just 2 files. So the format is a little bit different because I basically merged what I liked from yours, in which you have the inherited validation block for this other project from I don't know, her nickname is SolarWinds, right?
Sorry?
This lady that created this project where you wanted to commit first, I think her nickname or her handle is SolarWinds or something like that.
Yeah, Blaze something.
Yeah, so she said she created something, right? Is that the file I just sent? Yeah, that looks like it.
Yeah.
So basically, I got the ASVS requirement verbatim. I got the assurance level. I got the user
assurance level. Yes, that's something.
So from ASVS, the user story and the scenario. So user story as I, so that. and scenario given when then the validation thing, which we can take from this other project.
Yep.
And the external links which you had, which I found was a great idea. So all of this was generated in a few seconds by a Jupyter Lab script and some JSON parsing.
Yep. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I like this.
So
and this could be our metadata once we think about that. The assurance level is a good idea. Very, very good idea.
So I can send you for the ones I just told you. What was it? 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
I'll send you those files as well. Sorry,
okay.
I should have sent you those files already. I'll send you those files as well because they have no company information as far as I know.
Yep.
Let me just make a quick check that they are empty.
Yep.
And if they're empty, then I can send them to you. Give me a second. The
yeah,
story is ringing.
Okay, so given we so that means that Luis already has most of 14 covered anyway.
Right.
So maybe it's worth moving. So what he mentioned was that 8, 9, 10, and 11 haven't been done yet. So shall we have a look? So let me just see here again. Shall we go through V8, which we only did? V8 is data protection. We don't even have the category yet.
Okay.
Yep.
Just looking to see what's in it. Yep.
Let me create a new folder then. So data protection. File. 1.1.1. What is this one about? The first, verify that the application protects sensitive data from being cached in server components. Caching. Server. So let's copy the structure of one of them. Jesus. No, this is not. This would be protect sensitive. It's not about not storing, it's protecting.
Just mainly for CDNs and things, or is it? It's just any.
It would
caching, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it would include, depending on your architecture, right? It would include potentially the CDN or just the edges of your accounts, depending on where you store that data. Application protects sensitive data from being cached in server components. So one thing that we already have, where is it? I am certain that we already have some tests that talk about sensitive data. Yep. I think we could start with this. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it a bit further down here for the time being. Okay, the feature name would be protection. Secret engineer. I want to so that
Where do you get the feature name from?
so it's kind of trying to summarize what's on the description.
Okay, right.
Yeah, but happy to hear suggestions. Otherwise, would you word it differently?
I know. I was just looking at the page. I thought it was one of the titles on the page. I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So this is all under general data protection, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So
that I can boost my attack surface. Yep. And protect confidentiality of information. I think that works. Does that work? Okay, so moving on. Yep.
Specifically about caches, though, isn't it? It's about.
Well, it's anything. It can be application cache, load balancers, or any other places, kind of queuing messages, for instance. I would see it as covering all of those. So not necessarily where things are kept as master records, but everything it goes through, right, and ensuring that we are not leaving stuff that we shouldn't.
But you know, as saying when stored in server components, that a server component could be a database, couldn't it? And we don't mean that. We're specifically referring to
cache.
Temporary. Okay,
yeah.
I was
cache server component. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think if the story said stored in temporary server components, well, I don't know. Temporarily stored in server components.
Yeah, but this is the requirement itself, right?
Okay, I might be mixing that up. Okay,
I'm just copy pasting from the ASVS this sentence, but that is the use case, at least how I understand. When I want to protect sensitive data, when cached, we can just use stored. Cached, we don't need to use stored, right? I want to use protect.
You guys want to separate out like stored to say cached or logged so that it shows where it's at rest in memory or in something else?
Usually there is there's going to be other within 8 data protection. There are other requirements covering the storage part of it. And so it's different controls.
Okay.
So we would come to. Actually, let's confirm that is the case. Backups, client-side data protection, and sensitive private data.
Yeah, because cached infers kind of like, like Redis or things like that.
Yeah, but then 8.3.7 and 0.8 cover the sensitive private information that is required to be encrypted. Sensitive information subject to data retention classification. So those are kind of the things that come on data protection later in these sections.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. So this one is particularly on the cache sides of things. So I think this stands when cached in server components. We're going to use my attack surface. I think that works. For the scenarios, what would we? So the scenario would be protection of cache. Yeah, we can revisit that. But in terms of the thing itself, let me take this out so it doesn't confuse. So here we have a need to cache content. Right?
No, we have a need to not cache sensitive information, right? So that the application should send the no cache header to keep it from being cached in server components. So what we want to avoid is to certain forms where we might have passwords and privacy related data. We might want to send them with a no cache header.
Yep.
So it's more about not caching them as having to cache them. So the thing says sensitive data from being cached in server components and the load balancers, application caches, etc.
Yeah. So, but it starts with the need to actually cache something, right?
No, it's given the need to send data across the network. When I send the data, I set the no cache pragma header, so that then the information is not cached in the components along the way. Right. So you have, I don't know, content delivery networks and proxies and all that. So some data should be cached, the one that is static, but things that are privacy related shouldn't be cached ever.
Okay. How enforced is the cache now? The cache by servers.
It's the header in the
the header
HTTP request.
Is it usually enforced? So just because we're sending it doesn't mean that browsers aren't doing something else, right?
I mean, if they're well behaved, the malicious one would not. It's just like the robots TXT file, right?
Yep.
So you write it with the hope that they will not scan whatever you're telling them not to scan, but it depends on them.
Yeah. So I definitely agree and can see how the specific use case of the no cache header would help with that. But I would see this as including that, but being also wider than that.
I would look at the other requirements coming in, because what I've learned from doing this all day for several days now is that many times the next requirement actually goes and looks at exactly that situation you had in your mind.
Okay, yeah. No, that's a good point. It has happened.
I have a question for you. When you define sensitive data and you're just putting in credentials or security control related data, but you could cache sensitive data like a SOC number or an ID number, right? That's part of the URL. Do you want to separate out data from those types of things that you just put in sensitive information related to accessing the data on the backside if you're looking at the cache? So session tokens might be one, but if you tokenize data before you send it out to a client that's untrusted and they send it back in to get at the real data, you know, you would look at like how those expiries go on those tokens.
Yep. So there's in 8.3.8 covers that part on the retention.
Okay.
But I do agree with you, and that's kind of where my head was going. That it's not just about the information on what the client should do. It's also about other elements that may not be covered by the no cache.
Right. Yeah. Because if they cache the other type of data, there's other angles to get to it.
Yep.
Yep. I agree.
So, Luis, how were you, this specific scenario that you were talking about? So, how you had worded it in a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, I could word it more. I mean, the CWE is the 524, right? And the 524 is the use of cache containing sensitive information. And your code uses a cache that can be read by an actor outside of your intended control sphere. So this is more when sending information through the network, not in your premises, right? In your premises, you can cache some data, but not when using CDNs and such things. So given the need to transmit sensitive information, in a form or whatever, or transmit sensitive information, that's probably not. When the application sends this data on the network, it uses the no cache header.
It's no dash cache, isn't it? I can't remember.
Yeah, let me get you the
Yep.
cache control. Cache control no cache.
Yep, that's it.
Directive. Chat window.
Yep.
There it is.
There
Cache
it is.
control no cache.
Yep.
No cache and probably no store, no transform as well.
Yep.
This
That's
extends
it.
on HTTP, doesn't it?
Yep.
If
Sorry, say
using
that again?
HTTP, yes, of course.
Yeah. So, and that was going to be my question that I don't know the answer to. But for instance, would if information with that header would never reach, for instance, a Redis cache behind the load balancer, would it?
Well, the Redis cache is a particular kind of thing where you actually want to cache some things, right? So
correct. So I was thinking just so for instance, doing cache control no cache, there's more than just the sensitive data that that doesn't get stored. Right?
okay, well then the scenario here would be protection of sensitive data in transmission, and then the other one would be, and that is more hard to check, or this is harder to check, is how do you check for application caches? So when you're
exactly
caching yourself, your developers are caching into Redis cache, I cannot help you there.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
but it's a different scenario, right?
Right.
The one that is also covered by this control.
Yeah, that's where line 11, just saying cached server components and maybe being more specific would help.
And this would actually be on HTTP transmissions. So if it's a different type of protocol, this wouldn't work, right? This is specific to HTTP.
It's more an architectural issue, isn't it, rather than
Yeah. Okay, but what we can do is copy this whole scenario and create one that is a bit more generic towards other types of caches, right? Just so parameterization of queries. This is. So that's why I was referring on a more generic use case. I think, at least in my head, logically, it makes sense to. Sorry, let me roll back. If we've made the architecture decision to use something like Redis, for instance, it's because we've got a legitimate need to cache stuff, right? So what this control is trying to help us do is make sure that that sensitive stuff doesn't get cached. So the need is to actually provide a caching service, and then within there we want to ensure that when it's the sensitive information being looked at, that it doesn't cache that information. Correct? Then we disagree. Okay. So given that, yeah.
So obviously for this to work, if there is caching within the system,
Yeah.
and some things haven't to be cached, there has to be some indicator, isn't there? Which we know what that is in HTTP, because there's a well-defined header.
Yep.
But I think that perhaps if you're caching, SQL reads from a database, that's another caching situation,
Yep.
isn't it? And it would have to does it have to address that kind of issue?
So I think it has to address the issue. It doesn't need to be prescriptive on how to achieve it.
Yeah.
So I think we could say, for instance, given the need to cache, let's try it to
Are we,
cache
are we
information.
defining a test process? So we're saying when this type of item is requested, it should not be cached, and this should be verified by looking into the cache and seeing if it's there, or are we just saying that it's?
So the way
Is it something that we test, or is it something that we just define as being the
so
practice?
kind of the difference between having an automated check or having an assurance activity? That's kind of
okay.
No,
So
I'm asking. Is
that
that a kind of the distinction you're making?
Yes, it's about how this control is
So
realized. Yes.
Yep, makes sense. So the way and this is also kind of experience or the thought process for where we use this sensitive information. So the idea would be that when you, for instance, give this to a QA engineer and he's going to, he or she is going to go through this information, that they can think about, okay, I've got information being stored on a cache. I am going to see which, if it has sensitive information. And this is where I've kind of used these kind of to refer to variables, because then the sensitive information stuff can be, for instance, converted into regular expressions that look for these types of things. And that then gets embedded into whatever stays on the cache. Does that answer your question? So the idea would be that you'd not be prescriptive because you don't know the information. We don't know here the actual application, right? What sensitive information means in that context. But,
yeah, because it could be anything, couldn't it? It could be the words yes or no in response.
Your marital status. It could be your criminal record. It could be whatever, right? We don't know. But the idea would be that we can define this generically enough through using something like sensitive information. That would then, these are some things, for instance, that can fall under that category. And the expectation would be that someone would develop some kind of regular expressions or other mechanisms to verify if those elements exist within the data set.
Hey folks, it's Roger here.
Hey, Roger.
Just thought I would contribute with something here. Like what I've seen instead of using the generic term of sensitive information, like most companies have a data classification policy that has examples of what like secret or limited or whatever type of information is. So what I've seen done in the past is like define exactly what that classification is. Like, I don't know, internal classification and above would require this control, or like public information would be okay to be cached, something like that. Like just tie this up to the data classification. That way you don't have to describe all of the different types of data that you want to cache or not cache yourself, right? That work is normally already done and documented in the policy.
Yep. No, that's it's something we can add as the description. So the challenge on trying to make this generic is that we shouldn't assume what the data classifications look like. Right? So most companies that I worked on, for instance, have something called either confidential or secret or something like that. But for instance, I work currently in the B2B space, and we've got an internal confidential and the client confidential. Because we treat them in slightly separate ways. So that will be very contextual, I think, and to make this more generic. I think it's very worth adding here the reference that it should be, ideally, it would be aligned with your data classification policy. But I think we shouldn't assume what that classification policy looks like, because everyone does it differently, at least in my experience.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And the other thing is, I was gonna ask, like I heard like you guys talking about cache control, which is a browser control, but then there's also some comments about Redis and server-side
Yep.
component, would it be worth it, like documenting different stories for those different cases? Like, how would you guys
Yeah, so that's what
approach
we're trying to do here. So this first scenario to be on HTTP transmissions, and then we refer specifically what that means in the header that we can use to help, and leave the second scenario to something more generic that could be applied generically to cache. So that's kind of that's my suggestion of what we're trying to do now. I think that's. So obviously there's always a line between being too specific and then it's not applicable to everyone, and making it too generic and people not understanding what it means, right? So there's kind of this spectrum in the middle that we should try to find a balance.
Exactly. Yeah, this is the type of stuff that we deal with
Yep.
every day. Like, is it too generic or too detailed? And then are like the audience consuming this, are they gonna understand and know what we're talking about?
Yep.
I feel like I had a discussion about this with one of my development teams just yesterday.
Oh, I have these conversations many times.
Yeah.
It's abstractions all the way down. Okay, so, but I think it's a good thing in terms of the reminder to ideally. Just need to align the definitions of sensitive data to your information classification policy. Yeah, I think that's valuable advice. So trying to think this one here. So given the need to cache information, because that's the first thing, we use a Redis because we need it, not because we want it, generally speaking. I think, yeah, no, let's not go there. Given the need to cache information, when the cache, when information is stored in the cache, then we verify that sensitive information isn't cached. I'm not sure we can do much more on this. Does anyone have any obvious suggestions on how to make this one better? Because if not, I think this is one of those where I think the first one is very specific. The second one, kind of generic. We can always come back to it later. But if no one has a better idea, I would suggest we finish this one and go on to the next. 1, 2. Yep.
I tend to think it should instead be, given the need to cache information, when a piece of information is identified as being sensitive information, then it should not appear in the cache. That way around, rather than saying the information is stored in the cache.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Because it's
yep. Could you? Sorry.
Have I just try to repeat what I said? Yeah, I'll try. So when a piece of information being transferred is quotes sensitive information,
yeah.
When,
sorry, say that again. When information is transferred?
I was saying when a piece of information is being transferred, which is sensitive information.
Transferred. So we're talking about transfer or storage?
Well, it's when it's a specific piece of information, isn't it? That actually does fall in the category, and when that happens, we should ensure that it's not cached.
Yes.
Are we going to say and we achieve this with attached metadata such as HTTP no cache, as an example? Is that how we're going to describe
this
it?
one? So I'd like to keep it generic and not tied to anything relating to HTTP because it will always depend on the application, right? And we already have the HTTP use case up here.
But there always has to be some method. There has to be some indicator to know in a system which supports caching that a particular piece of information shouldn't be cached. Yes.
Correct. There always needs to be a mechanism to well or not, right? This control is actually about getting such a mechanism in place.
Should you
Because
just
by
describe it as
default, everything that
rhetoric?
would be cached, right? Here we're asking to have the additional consideration that what's sensitive should not be cached.
So this one that you're halfway through. So what?
Yep.
When information is being transferred, which is sensitive information, using your quotes that you've got. And then the next line is something like, then this information should not be stored in the cache.
Yep.
So the first step is to detect, and then the action is not to cache, rather than saying it's cached.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, I like that. Nice. Thank you. So this is, what is the CWE? 5524. Cool. Here we go. One done. File. So let's see. 812.
So 812 is the same weakness code.
So verify that all cached or temporary copies of sensitive data stored on the server are protected. So this is not about server components, it's about server are protected from unauthorized access or purged invalidated after the authorized user accesses the sensitive data. I would know very few organizations on the planet that would do this.
So this is the distinction being made between the server caching data, and in the first instance, in the 811, it being about other elements within the chain which are responsible for the
correct
for the efficiency of the system as a whole, isn't it? So it's the 812 is components that are knowing in a way, and the 811 is components which are just don't actually have implicit about whether or not something's sensitive. So the server would know which. The server doesn't need to rely on a no cache kind of metadata indicator, because it will know what its data is.
Yeah.
So would that be the main distinction?
I think so.
Because this is the originating element, isn't it, within the microservices network.
Yeah, I think that's how I read it as well. Let me just copy this over. Let's go through the thing one by. Trying to 812, which is my mouse is dying a slow death since yesterday. I need to get a new one. So cached or temp copies of sensitive data. So what does, it's, as you were saying, it's the same CWE. even. So
Yeah, so CWE.
yep. Yeah, I'm still getting used to VS Code, but in VI this would be DD, and the problem would be solved.
Yep, absolutely.
But anyway, so I hope I can. Okay, at least the copy went well. So the features. Yeah, this is not gonna work. Rest in peace, mouse. The feature name would be prevention.
Something like temporary copies of sensitive data are purged after use. I don't know. Cache or temp copies of sensitive data.
Yeah, because this has really two things here. One of them is protecting it from unauthorized access, and the other one on purging in the invalidation, right? So it's actually two use cases. So
Okay.
it covers both. Yeah, I'd leave probably the feature name as is, like that, and just.
You don't have to implement both, though, do you? So you could implement something to protect the data, in which case, from being accessed by something else,
Yeah.
which would be adequate. Or alternatively, you can say that the data after it's been accessed has to be purged, so that there isn't a retained cached copy. So there are two strategies to deal with the same.
Yes, but I don't think it's either or. It can be both and or, I think.
Okay.
Because you can protect it from, you can decide to just protect it from unauthorized access, but also have to ensure that,
But you could cache
after 8 hours that it kills itself, right?
Sure, but you could have something where an authorized user accessed some data and it, say, pulled a record from a SQL database, and then that same authorized user could come back and use that cache copy. But what hasn't to happen is another user gets access to that cached copy. That would be
the first use case. Yeah, the part on unauthorized access. So what do I want to do here? I want to, well, it's the same thing, actually. I still want to protect sensitive data, just in a slightly different place. Protect sensitive data in cached or temporarily copied, so that I can, well, it's also about reduction of, yeah, it's the same thing, right? Because it's just a different type of use case. I don't think we need to be inventing much more on this one. So in terms of the, unless someone disagrees, but if not, I would suggest thinking about the scenarios, and we probably need at least two different scenarios, right? One for the unauthorized access, and the other one for the purge and the invalidation. Would you agree?
okay.
If not, happy to discuss.
So there's 3 mitigation plans in the CWE. One is that you protect information that's in the cache, or you don't unnecessarily store sensitive information in the cache, or you can cache, but you apply some encryption to it to ensure that it's not readable by somebody else. So those are the 3 mitigations which it lists.
So let's start with the first one. What was the first one?
It just says protect information stored in cache.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with HTTP. Whether all cache or temporary copies of sensitive data stored on the server are protected from unauthorized access. To hold temporary copies. Is this the best way to go about it?
It seems okay. Yeah.
To the data. When the application stores this information, right?
Was it when the application makes a request for the data, then it's only provided to the it only provides the cache data for the appropriate authorization for the whatever authorization the application element is using.
Yeah, so
provide answers. So basically, as you cache stuff, you have to store it against an authorization key. I guess that's how it would be implemented. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Is this what we want to do then?
Yeah, I think so. So what the thing is, this control specifically, the scope is server, right?
Yes.
So we need to consider that. But it is there. So on this first scenario, it's sorry. Could you say it again? What was the first mitigation?
So given the need to cache or hold temporary copies of sensitive data, when the application requests some data, only responses. I mean, I'm assuming that what we've got is we're doing, say, a REST call, and we've got a JOT, and it has to basically match the same ID that's in the JOT in order to get a copy of something that's been cached, because it's only cached for a use case or a JOT or a user or a particular.
Yep. So, but I think you are. Yeah, I think you are looking at the scenario from a kind of a client service perspective. So you've got someone sending data and someone else receiving it, right? But I was at least looking at this control more from the perspective the data is in the server and I need to cache it, right? So what do I do with it now? Because otherwise you would be going into the realm of the input validation and all of those other controls, right? That we already have stories for. This is really only about the caching component on the server. At least how I'm reading it.
Right.
So there's a server that has a need to cache for performance, whatever reasons we may have, right? Then the application needs to store information in that cache so that it can provide the benefits of a cache, right?
But I think that's where it. So looking at the the availability description in the ASVS, it says data should only be available to authorized users as required. Yep. And I think that these requests that are made to this element, to the server element, incorporate.
So it's an extension, but it's a different scope, right?
Okay, it says escape. I mean, I'm looking at it as a different principal making the request. So
Okay. So given the need to cache or hold temporary copies of sensitive data, when
so just as a general principle,
yeah.
if something is being cached, then that cache copy is being able to be given the next, on a subsequent request. Yeah, so that's the point of having a cache, because you don't cache something and then never hand it out again.
Correct.
Okay. So there has to be a case where it is legitimate to return the cache version, or you won't return the cache version because it's not legitimate to give it to the request. So that suggests to me there has to be different types of requests, some which are legitimate and some which are not, which must actually relate to the authorization. So that was how I was just thinking of it. So you have a server and you have a component comes in and asks for some data on behalf of a particular authorization. And if it comes back and then asks for that data again, and it's the same authorization, that would be the use case for providing the cache. And if something comes in and asks for a particular piece of data,
yeah, but that's bringing all of the aspects of authentication and authorization that are covered also on the standard onto the data protection one, right? So in the real world, yes, all of those are kind of things that that we need to consider, right? But for this control in particular, I don't think that would come into play because it's covered elsewhere, right? We've got the authentication in the API and web service verification that have loads of those controls.
Well, I think it's about whether or not the person requesting the data is authorized. Their authorization determines whether or not they can receive the cache copy. So if I just read 8.1.2 aloud, it says, verify that all cached or temporary copies of sensitive data stored on the server are protected from unauthorized access. So it makes the point about whether or not that request from the data from the server is authorized
so
or not.
let me
If
give you an example. Yep.
You can return the cache. Okay, go ahead.
So I've got the perfect example. So some other place that that I worked at as a consultant, we had our WordPress hacked, and that happened because of a cache plugin. WP Rocket, which is one of the most popular ones. So what happened was they didn't change any server files. All they did was they introduced a few lines of code into the cached version. Right. So that had nothing to do with user authentication, right? They took advantage of an input validation type flaw to add content to existing files. That is about I think that's the type of use case that this control is trying to cover. Is that people that don't have specific authorization can't change things in the cache. But that is usually not a kind of a front end type of concern, generally speaking. Obviously, if we've got a broken access model, then everything's fair game. But it's more about how the server stores the information itself and who is allowed to add things to that bucket, basically. So what, basically, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is usually you don't give users access to your cache, right? That's something that you manage on your side. And
but it's a transparent element, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a performance element.
Correct. But your users, they just know that they are accessing a resource. Whether that resource is delivered to them from a cached version or from something taken directly from the database is irrelevant, and they don't know about it, right? That's a server side.
Yeah, if there's specific sensitive information which is going to be returned to some users and not others, then there has to be an element of the user who is requesting the data identifying, that there must be identifying information in there to determine.
Yeah, but I agree, but that becomes an authorization to the data problem and not a caching problem, right?
Sure. I looking at 812, it seems to me that 812 wraps the concept of cache data and whether or not the access is authorized. And so to do that, seems to me it's
Yes, I agree
Sorry.
with what you said.
I'm not sorry, I'm not trying to be awkward. I'm just
No. These are all good discussions. Look, I've been learning a lot by having these sessions with other people. It's all great stuff, right? So looking at this, given the need to cache or hold temporary copies of data, so the action being on when. So I think this would work and be coherent with both of it. So when I store information in this cache, then I protect information from unauthorized access or modification. What does protect information? No, this last one, it's a bit too negative. Protect information from unauthorized access or modification. The term. I set strong permissions for access to this. Strong is probably not the right word here. Do you think that would work? So what we want to do is make sure that when we store information in cache, that we are configuring permissions. That we're configuring a specific set of permissions for access to that information. Access and modification.
I have to go in a moment, actually. I do think it's tied to the authorized user. I'm just looking back at the CWE.
Yeah.
And it says a cache maintains a pool of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If the cache is accessible to unauthorized actors, attackers can read the cache and obtain sensitive information.
Right.
So that's the thing that's trying to be avoided.
Yeah.
An unauthorized person reading some data which should only be to an authorized person or actor, because it could be a service account, it could be a user, it could be a federated user, whatever. So all I can really say is it feels to me like it should be the case that where you have data that's cached which required authorization to retrieve. So for instance, you cache a query that's been made on my preferences in a database of how I like to see my screen, say,
Yep.
then that cached information, if that information is cached, then it should only ever be available to me, so
Yep.
authorize me. And if somebody else,
So it's not you, right, necessarily. Again, it depends on the scope of the application, right? Because this sensitive information can, for instance, be something related to you as a consumer, right? Let's say your marital status, but it could also be an organizational contract, right? That your whole organization has access to. It really depends on the type of use case of that particular flow.
sure. I mean, but I think the word authorization can include an individual or a group. So it's
Yes,
I
agreed.
know the point about the an org unit.
Yeah. Do you think this works, or what would we be missing? So we're storing information in a cache, and so from a QA perspective, they would check, we would tell them, so these are the permissions that I expect to have on this data. These are the parties who can modify that. And then we would have a check that would say, are these permissions with the values that I expect or not? Set or validate permissions for access.
Is it that you kind of want a negative thing that says then a user,
that's what I wasn't sure. Yep.
A non-authorized reader of the service would not see the cache data? Is that?
Yeah, so I was trying to do it on the positive, right?
Okay.
So more, I've assessed what are the permissions that I need, and I'm going to ensure they are there, as opposed to what would be the alternative? How would you write the alternative? Because again, I think it would be assuming a bit too much for something generic that we would need to validate that a particular set of users don't have access to the information, right? That will be very much context dependent.
On just one specific there, I mean, do we ever have a situation where we can modify the cache? Is the cache not? Are we not thinking that this is
so this is
a read copy of the underlying system?
Yeah, so this is caching on the server side, right? So users don't really have much of don't have any way to.
I don't think cache has been a hit or a miss. So it's either there's a hit because there's a read copy there which is usable, or it's a miss. Not that you would update.
Yep.
That's not really a cache attribute.
Yes. Would you suggest any change to this one?
I wouldn't put modification, because I don't think you modify caches. I think they're just hits or misses.
Yep. So
ooh.
I said stop permission.
What happened there? Did you?
Yeah. I don't know what happened. Yeah. Something
undo.
So, for instance, there are probably not many legitimate use cases for modifying information on a cache, but I've seen it done by attackers more than once. So I think if we're going to ensure that the permissions are set correctly, that maybe it's to say that no one can modify it, right? But it should still be part of the things that we verify. So, for instance, the hack that I've mentioned, if we had a way to ensure that the cache files couldn't be modified, we wouldn't have been exposed to that problem. but
Right.
we can check it out.
Um,
But there was my for access to. Yeah. Yeah, I think that works.
I mean,
Conscious of time.
if you had a service which was supposed to be caching, and it was possible for an attacker to break into it and to modify the cache, then
Correct.
that would be obviously not right. But
so it was in that instance, it wasn't
not,
yeah.
I don't know if what we should have here is something that says, you know, any caches it should only be operating as. I mean, the point about a cache is it's supposed to operate transparently, isn't it? It's something which improves the performance, but you don't have to send instructions to it because it's an autonomous component in the flow. So there's always this case where you could say, you know, with the database, you know, a user it shouldn't be possible to get to the underlying disks and read the data from the database, say. But is that the kind of thing that we're actually saying here, that there's that the cache is not just a cache, but it's somebody's getting access to the underlying implementation. I don't think that's
this
what
will usually be in the form of files, right? So it's just another file on a data server.
Yeah, or it's in memory as a as a hash. Yeah. If you want to put, you know, that the cache should not be modified, it should not be possible to modify the cache by other means or something. You could put that, but I don't think that that's really the focus of.
Well, just leave it. Let's leave it out.
Okay. Well. I'm sorry, we're dragging this out.
No, it's okay. No, this is all. I think this is all good stuff. But yeah, also conscious of time. So I think we can leave it here and then see when we schedule the next one. And really, again, apologies for being late. I messed up my calendar.
No, but let's see if we can. Yes, do something more regular as well.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I've that I want to do is, after these files that Louis made, see if next week that I can make the pull request to the project, and then we can take it from there. But now, personally, I'm going to have a bit more time because I was doing stuff for a course that I finished last week, so now I've got a bit more time to dedicate.
Yeah, same problem.
But yeah, that's finished, so I now have a bit more time to look into it. I think from an open security summit, they are doing kind of the monthly things, so we can still schedule as part of that. But I'm also happy to have some sessions outside of that. You're on the OSS Slack as well.
Am I? I only just kicked into this today. I wasn't attending the summit for the last 2 days.
Okay.
I am on that. I am on that Slack. I just don't have it open at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. So